Socrates was an ancient Greek philosopher who is widely regarded as one of the foundational figures in Western philosophy. He lived in Athens during a time of great intellectual and political development. While Socrates did not write any philosophical texts himself, his thoughts and methods are known primarily through the writings of his students, particularly Plato, and later, Xenophon. He is best remembered for his contributions to ethics, epistemology, and his development of a method of inquiry known as the Socratic method. In his lifetime, he particularly despised and often criticized the Sophists. Who were the Sophists? The Sophists were itinerant teachers in ancient Greece who charged fees for teaching and claimed to impart wisdom. Unlike them, Socrates did not claim to have knowledge, instead famously stating, "I know that I know nothing." His approach was more focused on seeking truth rather than persuading others for personal gain. The Sophists were particularly active during the 5th century BCE. They were known for teaching subjects such as rhetoric, philosophy, and politics to young men of Athens and other city-states, often for a fee. They focused more on teaching practical skills, especially the art of persuasive speaking, which was crucial in the democratic public life of Athens. One of the key aspects of their teachings was their emphasis on rhetoric, the skill of persuasive argumentation. In a society where public speaking and debate played a major role in legal and political matters, the ability to argue convincingly was highly valued. The Sophists trained their students to win arguments and influence public opinion, often without concern for whether the arguments were based on truth or ethical considerations. This led to the criticism that they prioritized persuasion over genuine knowledge or moral integrity. They were also often relativists, meaning they believed that truth and morality were subjective, varying from person to person or culture to culture. Protagoras, a famous sophist, famously said, "Man is the measure of all things," suggesting that truth is relative to the individual's perspective. This relativism put them at odds with philosophers like Socrates, who believed in the existence of objective truth and universal ethical standards. For the Sophists, what mattered most was how effectively one could argue a point, not whether the point was objectively true. The Sophists' reputation was mixed. While they were admired for their intellectual skills and contributions to education, they were also criticized for being more concerned with winning arguments and gaining influence than with seeking truth or moral virtue. Plato, a student of Socrates, also portrayed the Sophists negatively in his dialogues, painting them as deceptive and morally dubious figures. But despite the criticism, the Sophists played an important role in shaping intellectual life in ancient Greece. They introduced new ways of thinking about language, argument, and society, and their influence can be seen in areas like legal theory, politics, and education. They were pioneers in the study of rhetoric and argumentation, and their ideas about the relativity of truth and the power of language remain subjects of debate in philosophy to this day. Socrates' real reasons behind his opposition stem from fundamental differences in their views on truth, morality, and the purpose of education. While the Sophists were professional teachers who focused on teaching the art of persuasion and rhetoric, Socrates was concerned with discovering objective truth and moral virtue. He saw the Sophists' approach as superficial and manipulative, more focused on winning arguments than on seeking genuine knowledge. One major point of disagreement was over the nature of truth. The Sophists often taught that truth was relative and subjective, meaning that what is true can vary depending on the situation or the person. Socrates, on the other hand, believed in the existence of objective truths, ideas that are universally valid, such as justice, goodness, and virtue. For Socrates, the goal of philosophy was to uncover these deeper truths through reasoned inquiry and dialogue. He criticized the Sophists for promoting a form of relativism that, in his view, undermined the possibility of ethical and intellectual progress. Another reason for Socrates' opposition was their focus on rhetoric and persuasion, often without regard for truth. The Sophists taught their students how to make convincing arguments, even if the arguments weren't necessarily based on solid reasoning or facts. This emphasis on winning debates and influencing public opinion was, to Socrates, morally dangerous. He believed that true wisdom and virtue come from questioning assumptions and seeking the truth, not from persuading others to believe whatever is convenient or advantageous. Socrates also disagreed with the Sophists' approach to education and knowledge. The Sophists charged fees for their services, making education a commodity for those who could afford it. Socrates, in contrast, believed that wisdom should be shared freely, and that it was his duty to engage with anyone, rich or poor, who was willing to discuss philosophical questions. He saw philosophy as a communal activity aimed at improving society, while he viewed the Sophists as primarily interested in personal gain and social influence. Finally, Socrates was deeply concerned with morality, while the Sophists were often criticized for being morally indifferent. Many Sophists argued that moral rules were merely conventions created by society and could be bent or ignored when necessary. Socrates, however, believed that living a good and virtuous life required understanding and adhering to objective moral principles. He feared that the Sophists' relativism encouraged people to act based on self-interest rather than a genuine commitment to justice or ethical behavior.